do you think should be included in this package?
Well, look, we're glad that a financial package is being released today by the New South Wales government. It's obviously very important for businesses right throughout the Sydney metropolitan area and the regions. I think a good rule of thumb would be the Northern Beaches lockdown package, which was $5,000 if there's been a 50% reduction in turnover and $3,000 if there was a 30% reduction in turnover. That seemed to work during a difficult period. But obviously the assumptions in the budget that was brought down last week have completely been blown away, and we need to go back to the drawing board and get this right.
Does there need to be more targeted support here? I spoke to the Tourism and Transport Forum earlier, and she said that in particular New South Wales tourism will feel the brunt at a cost of about $6 billion. Should there be targeted support for people impacted?
There may well have to be targeted support from the state and Commonwealth government, as good as the package would be for Sydney-based and Blue Mountains and the Central Coast and Wollongong. We also have to think about the regions in New South Wales. Many of them were relying on a bumper winter school holiday period, with Sydney-siders going to places like Dubbo, the North Coast, the Mid-North Coast. All of that's off. In fact, it's against the law to travel. So the government's going to have to think outside the square. Obviously, we want people to comply with their health orders, and if their businesses have been shuttered over the coming 2 weeks, it's through no fault of their own. They're going to have government support.
Let's talk about the Greater Sydney lockdown. How do you think that Gladys Berejiklian has handled the outbreak so far?
It's been a difficult period for New South Wales, and a lot of these decisions have been finely balanced. As you'd be aware, the New South Wales opposition is not interested in point scoring. I don't want to play politics in a pandemic. This is a health crisis, not a political crisis. So I think there'll be time for questions at a later point, but at the moment, we support the government's decisions. We support the lockdown for the next 2 weeks. This disease and this variant is just so deadly. The priority has to be the health and safety of the people in New South Wales first and foremost.
Would Labor, though, would have liked to have seen a lockdown called earlier? We've got a situation in Perth where they've pulled the trigger after 3 cases, for example. Should a lockdown have been called earlier for Greater Sydney?
Well, look, I'm not making that claim at the moment. The government has insisted, and the Chief Health Officer has supported them, that they've made these decisions in line with the Chief Health Officer's advice to the New South Wales government. While ever that's happening, the New South Wales opposition will support them. As I said, we don't want to play politics in this pandemic. We really just want to get through it. If there's opportunities to ask questions at a later point to ensure that this doesn't happen again, particularly with our vaccination rates so low, of course we'll ask those questions, but everybody's in a difficult period when vaccination rates are at record lows, and Australia's really a laggard in the rest of the world when it comes to the number of people who have been vaccinated. Well,
let's talk about the vaccine rollout. Under National Cabinet changes, an indemnity scheme for GPs will be offered to administer AstraZeneca to anyone aged under 60 if they want that vaccine. Do you support this change in order to get more Australians vaccinated?
We do. The indemnity scheme is important. I think a public awareness campaign about AZ and its impacts on its importance in terms of vaccination is really important, particularly for the workforce who are frontline workers who are working around the clock and have done over the last 18 months. There's virtually been no public awareness campaign, and as a result, vaccination rates have been very low. Supply has obviously been a huge issue as well. So, look, it's good that the federal government's finally getting around to this, but for many people, they'll be shaking their head saying, look, it's very late in the game.
Do you think that there needs to be more incentives in general to get people to get the vaccine? I mean, we've seen it in the UK, in the US. Is it time to introduce incentives in Australia?
I think incentives, particularly around leave for frontline workers to go and get vaccinated, is really important. Most of the periods that are available, I know family and friends that have booked in to get their vaccine shot over the last couple of months have been during work hours, particularly those that are on casual workers and rely on income from casual work will need help from the Commonwealth government to get those vaccine slots and make sure that we can lift that number, that vaccination rate, right across the Australian workforce. I think particularly targeting it for frontline workers would be a good idea. The federal government should consider an income support, at least so that people can go ahead and get vaccinated during this period.